Hello? Yep. Hey. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Um, right. Right, right. What are you thinking, like what size hard drive? Like you thinking like if I dropped off a terabyte? Um, okay. Yeah, I definitely want all of it. So, if we're doing if we're gonna end up doing the hard drive anyway, then um, probably all the camera angles then. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Is all right. Overly broad out. Right. Okay. Okay. Right. Yeah, I mean that's right. Right. Yeah, let me know for the the 23rd what the what it would be like those two camera angles. Okay, sounds good. All right.
Thing in the gallery. So again, if you don't live together, let's spread out a little bit. Generally, everybody lives together except one person. So somebody give me the address, I'll come check it out. All right, let's call case.
In regards to 968.02 sub 3 complaint, case number 20JD15, appearances please. Attorney Kimberly Motley appears in person on behalf of JayAnderson Sr., Linda Anderson, and Starkeisha Del Rosa. Good morning.
Good morning.
Your Honor, Patrick Knight and Nicole Mesnick on behalf of Chief Barry Weber, who is present.
How do you spell your co-counsel's name?
M-A-S-N-I-C-A. Yeah.
Okay, I thought it made sense to take up the motion to quash Chief Weber's subpoena first. And then I understand there's counsel here on behalf of Lieutenant Roy. And that somehow, Ms. Motley advised that prior to the case being called that there was some issue getting the documents together that were demanded under the subpoena for Lieutenant Roy. I don't know, maybe he was busy. He was testifying in my court on Monday or Tuesday this week. So anyways, I think that's something that can be worked out. I have reviewed the filings of the parties with regard to Chief Weber's subpoena. And if you want to supplement the record at all orally at this time, you can do so. Otherwise, we'll proceed to a ruling. So do you want to add anything, Mr. Knight, to what you've already filed?
Yeah, just briefly, Your Honor. I recognize the nature of the proceeding and that it's an ex parte proceeding and that the court has wide latitude in respect to the receipt of relevant evidence. But the court is the gatekeeper here, and I think the matter there's nothing more evident of the lack of any relevant evidence that can be provided by Chief Weber than the responsive filing by the petitioner. That it's relevant because TOSA personnel were on scene and reported to the Milwaukee Police Department. There's no question that that Chief Barry Weber did not conduct, participate, or direct any part of the investigation. That the other reference matter is that some officers gave MPD a summary response of their involvement at the scene. Those reports, there's no evidence, and it's completely refuted that they were never directed or reviewed or received by Chief Weber. There's no allegation that the reports contain any information that he had any role in the investigation. The reference from the statement of seeing Mr. Anderson's body, that we addressed in the reply brief. He saw that as the photographs that were made available after the completion of the MPD, and the letter of recommendation 4 years after the fact. Then raises the question, I mean, he's publicly stated that he accepted the findings of the Milwaukee Police Department, the District Attorney's Office, and the United States Department of Justice. His acceptance of those findings is not relevant or doesn't provide anything germane to the issue before the court. And quite frankly, Your Honor, given even with the wide latitude involved, to compel Chief Weber to take the stand is essentially finding that anyone who expresses an after-the-fact opinion about an incident that becomes a legal matter, that somehow that becomes relevant evidence. And that, I would suggest, is not contemplated or permitted by the statute.
Thank you. Is there anything that you want to offer in addition to what you filed?
Yes, Your Honor. Just to reply to the respondent, I do think it's important to note for the record orally that in the respondent's brief of February 22nd, they indicated that the Milwaukee Police Department was the sole investigative body. 3 days later, when we conducted our hearing, we presented voluminous evidence to the court that that simply was not true, that the Wauwatosa Police Department was continuing interfering in the investigation of JayAnderson. The Wauwatosa Police Department at that time in 2016 and also presently was run by Chief Barry Weber. In addition to that, we do believe that based on Chief Weber's recent statements and also based on his statements over the last 4 years, that his testimony would be extremely relevant to these proceedings, especially in light of the fact that Chief Weber on December 23rd, 2020, in his written recommendation, stated that in each of the 3 instances, Mensah was confronted by a person who was armed and refused to put down their weapon. That information is new. As it relates to JayAnderson, there is nowhere on the record that supports the fact that JayAnderson refused to put down his weapon. That was not information that was publicly available. That is new and relevant information. In addition to that, Chief Weber was questioned by Steve Biskupich on September 21st. And in that interview, which was recorded, he stated that I saw him at the ME's office, meaning I saw JayAnderson at the ME's office. He did not say he saw pictures. He did not say someone told him about it. He said he saw him at the ME's office. So because of that confusion, in addition to the fact that he is the sole decision maker and the policy maker with the Wauwatosa Police Department, at the time of the JayAnderson shooting, he also was Joseph Mensah's supervisor. So he's not just some person that's making statements to the public. He's a policymaker for the Wauwatosa Police Department. He's in a unique position to receive and to be involved in the investigation. And so for all those reasons, and for all the reasons that we outlined in our briefs, we believe that Chief Weber's testimony is paramount to this hearing of the court. We believe that also that his testimony is relevant to the court. So we ask the court to honor the subpoena and to allow Chief Weber to testify. Thank you.
Okay. I think the matter has been thoroughly briefed. And I guess I'll begin with some of the points raised in the reply brief filed by Mr. Knight. I guess as a threshold matter, I agree with Mr. Knight that any subpoena served on Chief Weber has to be issued by the court and not by counsel, not by the clerk of the court. So as we sit here right now, I don't find that subpoena valid. Obviously, that does not preclude the court from issuing a subpoena under the statute. Aside from that, substantively, on page 2 of Mr. Knight's reply brief, he emphasizes that the investigation was turned over to Milwaukee County, or I should say Milwaukee Police Department, consistent with the interagency agreements allowing for what aspires to be an independent investigation by an agency not directly involved in the shooting. In this case, there's a reason to question whether or not this entire investigation, in fact, was turned over to MPD at the time it was alleged to have been turned over. We had testimony on the last date that there was continuing investigation by Wauwatosa officers on the scene as Milwaukee Police Department was coming out to the scene to take over the investigation. That testimony included an apparent search of the deceased. What I recall from the last hearing, which was I found significant, is that number one, there are questions as to why anyone from Wauwatosa was doing anything at the scene, touching any potential evidence, when there is knowledge that another agency is coming out to take over the investigation. And one of the pieces of testimony that stood out to me at the last hearing was there was an issue as to whether or not the deceased possessed identification that was requested by the officer. And apparently, at least what I got out of the last hearing's testimony, is that someone from the Wauwatosa Police Department removed his ID from his pocket or from some location, I guess, and then the bottom line was they couldn't recall where it came from. That strained credibility, in my view. So I don't know the answers to these questions. Counsel has documented here in her filing of March 5th, 9 reports that included work by the Wauwatosa Police Department, including, I don't necessarily find number 2 on this list, starting on page 2 of that brief, was the summary by Detective Lewandowski documenting that the investigation was turned over to MPD. But aside from that, there's a report by an Officer Griffin summarizing interviews conducted at the request of Lieutenant Mastrocola with Wauwatosa Fire Department paramedics, and also reports of trying to locate potential witnesses related to the Anderson shooting. There was apparently attempts at to interview witnesses at Freighter Hospital by Detective Lewandowski, allegedly at the request of Lieutenant Mastrocola. Item number 5, a report by Officer Roberson describing investigation conducted in the vicinity of the shooting to locate potential witnesses. as related to the Anderson shooting. A report of the investigation of witnesses by Wauwatosa Officer Michael Romais, conducted at the request of Wauwatosa Police Department Sergeant Scornia in connection with the Anderson shooting. Another report by Lieutenant Roy of witness investigations conducted at the request of Lieutenant Master Cola in connection with the Anderson shooting. A report by Wauwatosa Police Officer Dessinger summarizing an interview of Wauwatosa Fire Department Captain and a citizen witness as it relates to the Anderson shooting. 2 reports written by Detective Martin Keck, witness investigations as it relates to the Anderson shooting, and a report by Police Officer Cutts, KUTZ, who recovered digital surveillance of the scene from Madison School and reviewed the recording of the scene on the morning January 23, 2016. So it does raise issues as to, and I believe some of the testimony in the last date was that some of these interviews took place days after the shooting. So that is inconsistent with my understanding of what it means to turn over an investigation. I don't know if there was anything done here that shouldn't have been done, but the issue right now is whether or not there's a basis for the chief to testify. I will say that I don't find it relevant with regard to this letter of recommendation. It was written years after the fact. I don't think there's anything new in that document, and I don't think there's anything relevant to whether or not there was anything improperly done or probable cause of a crime, more specifically on the date of this shooting. The transcript of his testimony in connection with Attorney Biskupik and others has been filed. Certainly that was a different inquiry than what we have under the statute here. And I don't find a basis that counsel in this case needs to be satisfied with the examination that took place under the direction of Mr. Biskupik, who I believe was retained by the city to assess the situation as it relates to Mr. Anderson, but also the larger situation as it pertains to the viability of Officer Mensah continuing to serve in Wauwatosa. And really, this letter of recommendation does not provide any new information as to Chief Weber's view of Officer Mensah's culpability here. I think he's been quite transparent about that and has made numerous statements indicating that he is satisfied with the way that Officer Mensah went about his business here. So there is obviously a danger here of any testimony becoming overbroad and without counsel, given the fact this is an ex parte proceeding, it's going to be left to the court to limit testimony to that which is relevant to the proceeding here. Relevance under Section 90401 of the Wisconsin statute is a discretionary decision of the court. And again, based on the lack of cross-examination rights or really other assistance of counsel, I believe it is necessary to set parameters around any testimony that the chief would offer. But I do find relevant the chief's conduct on the date in question, His conduct in the ensuing investigation is potentially relevant to the charging decision. I do not find it persuasive that we've got 9 reports, all written by people under the ultimate supervision of Chief Weber, including lieutenants and people much farther up the chain, I guess to put it that way, than patrol officers, that all this would take place with no knowledge or input from the chief. Now, if that's what he testifies to, that's what he testifies to, but certainly this level of activity after a case is supposed to be turned over to another agency does raise concerns, and I think is a proper area for questioning. I don't think, and I'm not going to allow a full review of Officer Mensah's career in the context of this hearing, because the only thing that's before this court is the Anderson shooting and whether or not probable cause exists for commission of any crimes. And so there will not be any testimony here regarding the other Officer Mensah involved shootings. There were a lot of things in the, I guess what I'll characterize the disputed transcript that are not relevant to this hearing. In particular, media rules violations. It's not important to this inquiry. There was a lot of back and forth about what rules apply to you when you're on leave or administratively suspended, whatever the correct terminology was. And I don't find those relevant either. Certainly the statements of Officer Mensah speak for themselves, whether they were given to law enforcement, media outlets, or other individuals. There's no reason that, for instance, with regard to a radio interview that's been called into question, that a transcript can't be prepared. Officer Mensah has already invoked his right against self-incrimination, so he's obviously not going to be commenting on that. So there are some relevant areas of inquiry here. And I do find that the statute 96802 sub 3 does provide the court with greater discretion than the John Doe statute 96826 over the court's discretion in making finding a probable cause or lack thereof. I guess we have to rely partially on the John Doe statute with regard to subpoena issues, since the 96802 sub 3 does not directly address that issue, but really what I believe needs to guide the parameters of this is sticking to the point of this inquiry. This is not a political hearing. Not a racial hearing. The court's role here is limited and focused, and that's the way I intend to try to pursue this. I think it's clear that subpoenaed witnesses may only be compelled to offer relevant material testimony as set forth in State XRL Green Bay Newspaper Company versus Circuit Court Branch 1 of Brown County, an old case, 113 was 2nd 411. And in this case, petitioners have alleged a number of felonies that have been committed by Officer Mensah, including second-degree reckless homicide, homicide by negligent handling of a dangerous weapon. And while on its face, Chief Weber has no involvement, obviously, with the shooting, part of the determination by the District Attorney's Office was that Officer Mensah followed protocol I think that is an area which can be, chief can be questioned on. I know that there was discussion of that in the dispute transcript. But again, I don't think council needs to accept that transcript as the final word on this. Because as I previously indicated, that was a much broader based inquiry and was not focused on the issues before this court. And I think it's appropriate for the chief to testify what the policies were. And if he believes that Officer Mensah followed those policies, why? Or if he believes that he did not follow some policy, again, what should have been different? Council's also raised a claim of a conflict of interest due to the professional connection between the Wauwatosa Police Department, the Milwaukee Police Department, the Milwaukee District Attorney's Office. And I think it is relevant here to determine, again, what level the Wauwatosa Police Department was involved in the investigation, whether it was properly handled, and whether any discrepancies in this investigation influenced the charging decision. Failing to have the chief testify if he was involved in any way in either the investigation or subsequent discussions with the district attorney as to what should happen, the absence of that information would not allow the court to adequately scrutinize the district attorney's decision here not to issue charges, which is the purpose of the statute under the case law. Under the newspaper's case in 124 with second 499, I believe it's necessary for the court to look at a minimum of a similar amount of, not the same evidence and testimony reviewed by the district attorney's office. And obviously it's been alleged here that either the chief or those he was responsible for supervising had subsequent involvement in that investigation. So I hope that provides some parameters here as to what I envision the chief's testimony to consist of and what I anticipated not to consist of. And again, obviously this is a procedural animal, I guess, for lack of a better term, that's unlike any other within the statute. And obviously it's been far from overused over the years, but this is what the legislature has produced. I think the statute is quite clear on its face. We do have the benefit of the K-Law decision written by former Justice Sykes, which I think is probably the best word on 96802 sub 3. So based on all those factors, I'm denying the motion to quash the subpoena. The court will issue a subpoena at a date that works for the parties, and the chief will be expected to testify at that time. Mr. Knight, will you accept service of any subpoena on behalf of Chief Weber?
I will, Your Honor.
All right. And so let's look at a date now. I did not anticipate at any time him testifying today. I think we could shoot for a morning or an afternoon.
May 4th at 9 a.m.
That works, Your Honor.
Fine by me.
May 4th, be the next date then, as it concerns Chief Weber, and we will forward a subpoena to your office, Mr. Knight.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Anything further regarding this matter?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you.
Your Honor, I do want to bring up something, if that's okay.
Bring it up.
Your Honor, according to the John Doe statute, and again, the court recognized that this is different than a John Doe hearing per se. It does require that the court complete the testimony within 6 months. I believe that this hearing is different, but we did file the petition on October 21st. I do want to note that I'm fine with the May 4th date. We're happy to waive that 6-month time period if the court is to adopt the fact that this hearing also is to be conducted within 6 months time period.
That's not my reading of the statute. I mean, it is part of the John Doe statute, but I don't see that. I'm sure people will be happy to show me if I missed something, but I don't read 96802 sub 3 to have that requirement in it. It's not anywhere in the plain language of the statute as it is under the John Doe statute. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't believe the court is bound by that parameter at this point.
No problem here. I just want to make a record.
Sure.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Free to go. Thank you. And then was there something that we need to address with Lieutenant Roy's counsel?
Yes.
I think the judge is fair. I think he's really paying
Can I
attention.
make an appearance, counsel?
Appearing on behalf of the City of Wauwatosa and Lieutenant Roy, George Anderson.
I'm going to ask you to use a microphone. We are live streaming. Go ahead.
Appearing on behalf of of Lieutenant Roy, who's in here in person, George M. Schimmel.
Good morning. I was just advised briefly there was a time issue in terms of compiling reports that have been requested.
Your Honor, just for the record, Attorney Schimmel and I have had several communications with the subpoena. We were asking of the Wauwatosa Police Department through Sergeant Roy to produce several training materials that are relevant to this proceeding. In communicating with Attorney Schimmel, as the court has noted, Sergeant Roy has...
Lieutenant Roy.
Oh, sorry. Well, I believe he was just promoted to sergeant.
Well, I don't know what he was, but I know what he is.
Oh, sorry.
He just
Okay.
testified in front of me the other day.
Sorry. Lieutenant Roy, as the court noted, was testifying earlier. So in talking with Attorney Schimmel, I met with him yesterday. I shared with him the fact that for some of the materials, there's missing embedded video, as well as some of the documents have been redacted. I believe that we will be able to resolve this issue off the record in light of the fact that the court has now set another hearing on May 4th. I'm asking the court, and I believe Attorney Schimmel will agree with me, to allow Lieutenant Roy time to get the embedded videos and the redactions to us. As I understand, he needs a week. That's at least what I was told yesterday by Attorney Schimmel, if I'm correct. And, you know, if that satisfies the court, then I'm happy to not object to that also.
Counsel?
If there's any issue, then I guess May 4th, we would also then discuss it with the court.
Well, no, you would give me the documents as soon as possible. And then if he's
Right.
not able to produce those, then we come back on May 4th.
Well, that's the plan.
Like you want to tell you something, counsel.
Okay, Your Honor, yesterday I discussed this matter with Ms. Motley, and she showed me some screens from her computer, which indicated some redacted segments. She's asked for unredacted segments, and Lieutenant Roy has indicated that some of these apparently have been decided by another circuit court judge, that those redactions are to be made and are justifiable. So I guess we have to clarify that issue.
What other proceeding are we talking about?
Can Lieutenant Roy address the judge?
It's up to you. You're his lawyer.
Go ahead.
It's a mandamus action, Your Honor, in front of Judge Dugan.
In relation to this?
No, Your Honor, a different matter, same records.
Oh, well, then we're talking about Judge Hannah Dugan?
Yes, sir.
Well, then it's not relevant to this court's determination about what should or should not be redacted. I don't know what she did, why she did it, or what she's proceeding on. But I don't find any reason, unless somebody could explain to me that it's directly related to this, and based on that, her ruling should govern anything I do, then I consider that. But in the absence of that, whatever she's doing, I don't think is relevant to this. So I guess what I'll say is, if there's an issue, whether it's objection or something else, if you want to get on a conference call in an attempt to work anything out that you don't believe is getting worked out before May 4th, I'll make myself available. But in the absence of that, I'm going to hope that you guys do it.
Very good.
Anything further with regard to Lieutenant Roy? Asking you, counsel.
I'm sorry, nothing else there at this point, Your Honor.
Is he scheduled to testify today or a different day?
No, it's just a subpoena due to
All right,
taken.
okay. Then I guess you guys are free to go if you wish.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Honor.
Thank you.
And so, give me the lineup for today as you understand it.
Your Honor, excuse me. The lineup today will, we expect to testify Starkeisha De La Rosa, JayAnderson Sr., Pamela Holmes, James Trainum will be testifying by Zoom. And if we have time, Ricky Burhams.
Okay. Are you prepared to proceed?
Yes, if I can just get a minute to kind of set up my electronics.
That's fine. I need to make a record while you're doing that. And again, there's been no attempt to hide anything, but I think it should be put on the record that when counsel filed this petition, that you filed with co-counsel, and co-counsel is my ex-wife. And I indicated, and you can confirm this if you like, Ms. Motley, but when you brought the petition in, and I saw your name and her name on it, I indicated immediately that I would be recusing myself because I don't think that was a proper appearance, really primarily for appearance purposes, which I don't want to minimize, but it is a little bit less serious than an actual conflict. And I was advised at that time, I think you told me within a couple minutes, that based on that position of the court, that you were confident that co-counsel was going to immediately withdraw from the proceeding, which she ultimately did, and the court assigned an order to that effect. But just so it's clear, I have not had a single conversation with my ex-wife since 2012. At the time we sold the marital home. I don't anticipate that changing in the future. And I don't believe that the fact that she was a signatory to this original petition is in any way affecting the court's view of this. And it's certainly not creating a situation where I view this situation more favorably to the petitioner than to the officer. So just so that's on the record, I think that's probably a good idea to make sure everybody's aware of that. And did I misstate anything with regard to that sequence of events?
No, Your Honor.
So if you need a few minutes, it's fine. But whenever you're ready, then we'll have the first witness testify.
May I ask that we put one other thing on the record, just
Go
so
ahead.
it's clear? Just to address the quashing of Joseph Mensah's subpoena, which I did not object to.
Yes, Officer Mensah filed a response and I believe if I recall correctly, an affidavit indicating that were he called to testify, he would invoke his rights under the Fifth Amendment against self-incrimination. And it's certainly within his right to do so. So I really did not see any purpose here in having him get on the witness stand to say what we have in writing. I am going to take judicial notice of his position as set forth in his affidavit, as well as the motion to quash. I mean, typically, for those of you who may not be as familiar, there are times when someone will be required to invoke their right against self-incrimination in the witness stand, on the witness stand. But those situations are typically jury trial situations so that the jury can see what the person has decided to do. Obviously, there's no jury here. I don't need him to say what I can read. So based on that, I believe we reached an agreement that he was not going to be required to appear. Is that an accurate characterization?
That's correct.
Anything else before start testimony?
No.
And are you ready now or do you want a few minutes?
I'd like a few minutes, please.
All right, we'll start in 5 or 10 minutes.
Thank you.
All right, if you guys could make sure that you share the stream out. Let's try to get as many people watching this. We're going to end up writing, a follow-up article on this stuff anyway. But let's get it shared out.
I'm sorry, I told you what?
So this is day 2 of the John Doe hearing related to the JayAnderson death
I don't think his name.
from former Wauwatosa police officer Joseph Mensah. This hearing is to see if there's enough evidence to find probable cause to charge him. This is scheduled to go till 5 p.m. So sometime through this, they're going to end up taking a break, at which time, just because we're limited on the streaming, I'm going to end the stream and then do part 2. So it'll end up being 2 different videos.
Could you start?
Thank you, April. Yeah, that'll help. We need every little bit of help at this point. There's a lot of records that need to get paid for. Continued roof over my head. We just got approval from a couple different places for some records.
So we should have some of that very, very soon. But I found out this morning, while I'm setting up the stream, that kind of what we're looking for is going to cost a bit of money. No, you're good. You're good.
Not yet. Yes. Okay.
So earlier, when we first started streaming, the judge was talking about the last hearing date, and that he had some serious concerns as far as Wauwatosa Police Department's involvement in this investigation, because according to Wisconsin statute, when there's an officer involved shooting, the shooting department is not allowed to conduct investigations, and the judge was extremely concerned with the amount of officers that were talked about in the first hearing day, and there's several more. But he was concerned about their involvement with the investigation, handling evidence, witness interviews. And then he had stated it led to serious concern.
Oh, okay. No problem.
And then, as we outlined in the first article, Tosa was trying to say that Mensah did not violate department policy. And they're with denying Weber's motion to quash this morning. They're going to end up talking about the policy violations. I'm just going to try to, sorry, I'm going to be kind of going back and forth here. So this is the first article that we wrote about covering the first hearing. So if you guys missed that, the first article is very detailed.
Almost ready?
Yes. And Judge, I was wondering, this is just a question. Like,
You really shouldn't. I mean, microphones are working well. It shouldn't be that hard. Yeah, probably shouldn't. You all day?
you find it?
Yeah, I found it.
If it's you, I was thinking we'd start at 1. I would anticipate starting at 1 o'clock unless I have a court reporter issue.
Okay, no problem.
We can
Thank you.
try and get some more in.
For the notes account. No, they didn't talk back, but I'm sure she will. She keeps listening here.
Because I heard from a couple of mistakes.
But see, when I went on it, I could hear.
Yeah, I've gotten a couple of reports that the live stream, people are having trouble hearing on it. I don't believe the live stream is malfunctioning. I believe you have to make sure that your sound is not muted. And then you should be okay.
Okay. Thank you. Oops. Thank you. You ready whenever you are, Alpha? You're my witness.
Okay.
So kind of just so you guys are aware, kind of throughout this hearing, I'm going to be kind of switching screens and posting some stuff. And I'm also
These are the parents.
going to be taking notes
Yes.
and kind of doing a bunch of other things. So
right, fair to see.
Your Honor, I'd like to call Starkeisha Della Rosa to the stand, please.
Okay.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give in this matter be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth so help you God? You may be seated. Please spell and state your first and last name for the record.
All right, please pull the microphone up to you. Speak directly into it.
My first name is Starkeisha. You spell it Starkeisha. Last name Della Rosa. Delarosa.
Your Honor, and for the record, can you see my screen, my computer screen?
Only the back of it.
I have it plugged in. So I don't know.
What's your goal here?
I wanted to show at least one exhibit.
You want to share a screen? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, please. Sorry.
I think I have to make you a co-host in order to do that.
But I'm not on the Zoom. Should I be on the Zoom too?
Yeah,
Okay.
if you want to do that, you're going to need to.
Oh, this might be good. We might be able to see exhibits. Yes, it's on the Milwaukee County website from their
Do you have
live
the
stream.
ID?
379482. You mean the long?
The meeting. Well, is that the password?
Mm-hmm.
The other one, the first one. I think it's 978 something.
You got it, Andy?
Yeah. 978-6336-5342.
Thank you. Sorry, what's the password?
379482.
Oh.
Do you? Oh, here's share screen. Hello. Okay.
Now, do I need to have my Zoom on for the whole hearing?
Not on my account, but I guess you'll need to have it on if you want to share documents.
Okay, because last time we didn't do this.
And you got documents on the screen?
Yes.
I don't know. I don't remember yesterday, so
Okay. Okay.
nor do I know very much about this technology.
No problem. Me neither.
Nor am I that interested in learning about it. So
Yeah.
there we go. Right, all set?
Yes, thank you. So, Ms. Della Rosa, on June 22nd, 2016, who did you live with?
JayAnderson Jr., JayAnderson Sr., and Linda Anderson, and my 2 kids.
Okay. And on June 22nd, 2016, were you in a relationship with JayAnderson?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And you guys have a child together, if I understand?
Yes.
Okay. I want to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 42. Sorry, Exhibit 57. Do you see that?
No.
Oh, not yet. Okay. So do I have to?
You don't see the Zoom on the other screen there?
I see my Zoom, but you need to let
Over
me
there.
share my screen. Or I can share the screen actually. Sorry, my fault. Here we go. So could you please identify for the record where JayAnderson Jr. is in this picture?
He's on the side of me.
Okay, who else is in this picture?
Our daughter, JayAnderson, and my son, Dewan.
Okay, and when was this picture taken?
A couple days before he got killed.
Okay, thank you. Now, on June 22nd, 2016, well, first, let's backtrack. What type of person, how would you describe Jay?
Funny, a family guy. He was always happy, joking, playing around.
And on June 22nd, 2016, were you with JayAnderson Jr. that day?
We was outside playing with the kids, my two kids and his nephew playing cans.
Okay. And you did that on June 22nd?
Yes.
And where did you do that at?
Outside our house, Linda, where we all lived at.
Okay. And on June 22nd, 2016, was Jay employed?
Yes.
Where is he working?
He was working at Ruby Tuesdays as a cook.
Was he working full-time there?
Yeah.
Okay. And did he work anywhere else?
Yeah, he worked with his dad doing cutting the grass, snow removal, and he also did home health care before.
Okay. So he had 3 jobs.
Yes.
On June 22nd. Okay. And on June 22nd, were you also working?
I had just stopped working. I drive the school bus, so the schools was just letting out.
Okay. And on June 22nd, do you know if Jay was working that day?
No, he actually had that day off.
Okay. And on that day, would you guys, let me take that back. What time was the last time you saw JayAnderson Jr.?
About 10:30 when he came home.
Sorry, 10:30 a.m. or p.m.?
10:30 p.m. when he came home. And he kind of woke me up. He called me to ask me to unlock the door. And I told him that his dad and him was upstairs, so he told me don't worry about it.
And 10:30 p.m. when you saw Jay Jr., who else was in the house?
Our child and Jay Senior and Linda.
Okay. And was everyone awake?
Everybody but Linda.
Okay. And so at 10:30, you saw him, 10:30 p.m. And then at some point he left?
Yes, when he came home, he woke me up and told me that I left the car on the street. And I told him I know I was waiting on his brother to get home because I had to leave out early in the morning. I didn't want to block nobody in. So I gave him the car keys to move it. And he told me he was going to be right back. He was running to the gas station.
Do you remember what time that was?
He left out about 10:50 p.m.
10:50 p.m. You remember him leaving the house?
Yes.
On June 22nd?
Yes.
Did he leave by himself or did anyone go with him?
He left by himself.
Okay. And he told you he was going to the gas station?
Yes.
Okay. And so that was the last time that you saw him?
Yes.
Okay. And then on June 23rd, at some point, the Milwaukee Police Department came to your house, correct?
Correct.
And what did they tell you? Well, first of all, what time did they come to your house?
They came about 7. I didn't open up the door. Jay Senior opened up the door in between time. Me and Jay was putting our clothes on to go look for Jay because he wasn't answering my phone calls nor replying to my text messages or answering for Jay. And
hold on. Sorry, let's go to that. Let's do this in order. So after Jay left at 10:50 p.m., did you try calling him or texting him or anything?
I called him over 200 times and I texted him about 100 times saying where he was at because it wasn't like him not to come home or not to call me nor shoot a text and tell me that he's okay and he'll be there.
Do you remember, did he ever call you back?
No.
Did he ever text you back?
No.
So from 10:50 p.m. until what time do you continue to call him and text him?
I called him all night. My last call was at 5:10. In the midst of me calling him nonstop, I had called all the hospitals to see was he there. I called the county jail and District 4 to see if he had got picked up or anything because he wasn't replying to my messages.
Did you call any of his friends?
Yes, I called two of his best friends that he usually be with and go out with, and they told me that they wasn't with him or they hadn't seen him.
Did you call Hakeem Fudge?
No, I didn't call Hakeem.
Okay. Did you call anyone that saw him that night and talk to them?
No, I had the person I talked to, he seen him earlier that day, but not at night.
And who was the person that you talked to?
Wyman.
Can you spell it for the record?
WYMAN.
Okay. And you call Wyman, who is Jay Anderson Jr.'s friend.
Yes.
And he said that he saw Jay Anderson
During the daytime.
During the daytime, before you saw him.
Yeah.
Last saw him. Okay. So then at some point you said that Jay Anderson Sr., that the police came to your house. What time was that?
About 7.
Okay. And Jay Anderson Sr. answered the door.
Yes.
And what happened?
Jay tried to step outside with the officer, and the officer told him, "No, I need to come in and speak to you and your wife."
Okay. Do you remember what officer came by? Do you remember what officer came by?
It was an officer and a detective from Milwaukee.
Okay. Okay. And what did they tell you?
I went in the bathroom because I just had a gut feeling that something wasn't right because he wasn't responding to me, and I texted and told him to call me. It was about the baby, and he usually regardless will call back. So when they came in, I just remember Jay going to tell Linda, and Linda jumping up, running out the room, and I went in the bathroom, and I can just hear Jay say, I can hear them telling Jay and Linda that baby Jay got into an altercation with the police.
You can hear who saying that? Baby
Detective.
Jay. The detective told
Jay and Linda that baby Jay got into an altercation with the police, and after that, I can just hear Jay scream and say, "Not my boy."
Okay. And at some point, did the detectives talk to you as well?
Yes, after they talked to Linda and Jay, the detective asked me to come outside to talk to me.
Okay. Now, according to Exhibit
And I kept asking him, like, so why? What happened? What went wrong? And he said he had a gun. And I asked him, did he point the gun? Did he shoot? He told me no. He said Jay had a lot of money on the front seat with 2 cell phones and a gun. And that the gun wasn't loaded, that the clip was actually in the back seat.
Oh my God.
So the detective told you that Jay had a gun in the car, but the clip was in the back seat of the car.
Oh my God.
Okay. And did he ask you about the money? Did Detective Johnson ask you about the money?
He just kept saying he had money on him and marijuana. And I told him, I said, we both work. And he asked me, do Jay smoke marijuana? Do he sell marijuana? Is Jay dealing with another female? Because it was a lot of phone. He had a lot of missed calls and a lot of text messages during that night.
Mm-hmm. Did he ever ask you where Jay worked at?
No.
Okay. Did he ever ask you, what you did that day with Jay?
No.
Did he ever ask you, what time was the last time that you saw Jay?
No, he was just more concerned on why did Jay have marijuana on him and was he a drug dealer?
Okay. And he also inferred, it sounds like you're saying, that he had other girls calling his phone.
Yes.
What did he say about that?
He just kept asking me, was I sure that I was the only one calling his phone? Was I sure that I was the only person he was in a relationship with? And I'm like, yeah, we live together. We've been together at that time for 6 years. So,
and this is literally minutes after he told you that Jay Anderson Jr. had been killed.
Yes.
Okay. Did he ask you about the money? Why did he have all this money on him?
No.
Is it safe to infer from what you're saying that he sort of was assuming that Jay was, well, let me just take that back. But he did strongly insinuate that Jay was selling drugs.
Yes, because after I told him that Jay do smoke marijuana from time to time in Black and Miles, he asked me, where did Jay buy his marijuana from? And I asked him, why does that matter? Because that's not why he got killed. He wasn't doing a drug transaction and he doesn't sell. So I just feel like at that time that was something that shouldn't even been brought up.
Did he tell you that Jay was at Madison Park?
Yes, he told me he was at Madison Park and that they found marijuana in both parents' pockets.
Okay. Did he ask you why he would go to Madison Park?
No.
Did Jay ever go to Madison Park before this?
Yes, we took our kids there often. He went there often to play basketball with my brother and his friends.
Okay. How long did this these two officers talk to you?
They talked to me for 45 minutes straight.
And how long were they at the house?
A little bit over an hour.
Okay, so they're at the house for a little bit over an hour, and they talked specifically to you for 45 minutes.
Yes.
Okay. And during that time, did they ask you about Jay's sleeping habits?
No.
Okay. And what were his sleeping habits? What kind of sleeper was he?
He was a heavy sleeper to the point where I used to have to shake him numerous of times to get up for work after the alarm went off, to get up to help with the baby, to just get up to go move the car if we had Linda or Jay blocked in. So he was a deep sleeper.
Okay. At that point in time, did they ask you to, where did you and Jay stay at in the house?
We had the basement.
Okay, and is it a 2-story house?
You can say that because the basement was finished. So.
Okay. So you and Jay and the 2 kids stayed in the basement?
Yes.
Okay. Did the detectives at that point in time ever ask you to look at where you guys were staying?
No, they never even asked us. When they went to my mom's house first, they asked my mom where did we stay at. Like they didn't know where he stayed, but they had his ID.
They had his ID that day.
Yes, after he got killed, they went to my mom's house first, and because the car was registered to her, and they asked her where did me and Jay stay, and she couldn't give them the address off top, and they told her the address, and she told them, yeah, that sounded about right.
And at that point in time, they had his state identification card.
Yes, and then they asked her not to call me to tell me that they was on their way over.
Okay, I want to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 39. Is this the identification? Does this look similar, or is this identification card that Jay Anderson had on June 23rd, 2016? You see it? Oh, it's not. Okay. Let's see. Share. You see it now?
Yes.
Was this Jay Anderson's state identification card on June 23rd, 2016?
Yes.
Is this the identification that the Milwaukee police officers showed you?
Yes.
Okay. And you said that they first went to your mother's house on June 23rd. Why did they go to your mother's house again?
Because Jay was driving the car that was registered to my mom's name.
Okay. And then they asked your mom where he lived,
you lived. They asked her multiple questions as far as why did he have the car? How long was me and him in a relationship? What type of guy was he? Did we have kids? How many kids we had?
So they questioned her. They interviewed her.
Yes.
Okay. And then after they interviewed your mom, as you understand it, they came and interviewed you.
Yes.
Okay. And so when they came to your house, also, you said that they never asked to look at your room where you
No.
guys stayed at. Did they ask you, if Jay was on any medications?
No.
Did they ask you his mental state?
No.
Did they ask you how Jay felt about law enforcement officers?
No.
Did they ask you, about? Stop share. Did they ask you about Jay's mood that day or any other days?
No.
Okay. Now, at some point, the interview ended, correct?
Yes.
And did those particular cops, Detective Stephen Johnson, or any other Milwaukee Police Department officers, did they ever question you again?
No.
Okay. And during that interview, were you distraught? Were you upset?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to refer to Exhibit 42. If you can go to page 15.
That gun detail is going to be important here. You'll find out why.
Let's see. At the end of the interview, do you see it on the screen?
Yes.
At the end of the interview, the officer noted that Della Rosa was highly emotional and crying throughout the interview and could provide no additional information. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Did you answer all their questions?
Yes.
Okay. And did they ask for your phone number?
No.
Okay. Did they ask you who Jay worked with?
No.
Did they ask you what his work schedule was?
No.
Okay. Did you tell them that Jay Anderson Jr. is a heavy marijuana user, usually smoking at least 7 marijuana blunts each day, and to the best of your knowledge, he does not sell marijuana? Did you tell them that?
No. I just told him that he smoked marijuana and Black and Miles. I was never able to tell them how many because we both work, so I'm not with him 24/7 to actually sit there and count how many times he smoked it.
Okay. And at some point they left, and like you said, you've never talked to these officers again. Is that correct?
Correct.
Were you ever questioned by any other Milwaukee police officers after this?
No.
Were you ever questioned by any Wauwatosa police officers, period?
No.
Were you ever questioned by any federal law enforcement officers?
No.
Were you ever questioned by anyone from the Milwaukee County District Attorney's Office?
No.
Did anyone, as you know, ever come back to the house to, view the room that Jay stayed in?
No.
As far as you know, did anyone ever ask for, Jay's medical records?
No.
At some point, you also went down to the Milwaukee DA's office, District Attorney's Office, correct?
Yes.
And when you went down to the Milwaukee District Attorney's Office, when did you go the first time?
I want to say it was like in November.
Okay, how many times did you go down to the DA's office?
We went down there, I want to say about 3 or 4 times. I want to say 4 to be exact because they showed us enhancement video besides the first time.
Okay, so the first time when you went down there, is that when they showed you the video?
Yes.
Okay, and who showed you the video, or what were their titles, if you don't remember their names?
I want to say Kent Laverne was there, and it was 2 other officers.
Okay, and who did you go down to the DA's office with?
At that time, we had a lawyer named Yao from Chicago, I want to say, and it was me, Linda, Jay, and Jackie.
Could you just say the full name for the record, because the court reporter has to type each name.
Linda Anderson, JayAnderson Sr., and Jackie Anderson, I want to say that's her last name.
Okay, so it was Jay Anderson Sr., Linda Anderson, Jackie Anderson, you,
and
Attorney Yao. How do you spell Yao's last name?
I'm not sure.
It's like YAOU, I believe.
I think so.
Okay. So the 5 of you went down to the DA's office to view the video.
Yes.
And did you all view the video?
No, they only let me, JayAnderson Sr. and Jackie in.
Okay, so only let 3 of you in. Did they let your attorney in?
No, they told him he couldn't come back there.
Why did they say that?
I'm not sure. They just told him no.
Okay, and why did you go down to see the video? Did they call you to come see the video?
Yes, they had called Linda and told Linda we had 24 hours to come see the video or they was going to release it to the media.
Okay, and even when you saw the video, did anyone question you?
No.
Okay, so you came in, you saw the video, and then you left.
Yes.
Okay. Did you have any questions for them at that time?
Yeah. Because the video that I seen, his hands was up and he never touched nothing or lunged. So I was confused on why did he get shot that night.
Did they ask you where Jay got the gun from?
No.
Okay. And then you came down a second time. And when you came down the second time to the Jay's office, what happened?
We went over the paperwork with Kent Laverne and Chisholm.
What paperwork?
All the paperwork from the incidents, the police reports, Mensah statement, and they had pictures and stuff.
Do you remember when you went around, I know it's 4 years ago, and I'm sorry to keep asking you for dates.
It was in December.
So in December, you went back down to the DA's office, and John Chisholm was there, Kent Laverne was there, and they showed you pictures and police reports. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And was that the day that they gave you the decision?
No.
Okay. So when you went down there that day, you were with 2 DAs, the 2 top DAs, Kent Laverne and John Chisholm. And did either of them question you about, Jay's anything regarding JayAnderson Jr.?
No, they couldn't even answer questions that we had.
Okay. Were there any detectives that were there also?
I don't think it was no detectives, but it was like a couple cops in there.
Okay. And then you went down a 3rd time, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And do you know when that was?
We need yes or no.
Sorry.
Yes.
And when you went down the 3rd time, what happened?
They showed us an enhancement video and they answered a couple questions that we had.
Okay. And in that time, for the 3rd time, when you went down to the DA's office, was the district attorney, Kent Laverne, was he there?
Yes, both of them, Kent Laverne and Chisholm was in there. Chisholm was back and forth.
Okay, so John Chisholm was in and out of the room?
Yes.
Were there any Milwaukee police officers there, detectives or lieutenants or anything?
It was 2 lady cops in there.
Okay. And in that 3rd meeting, did anyone ask you any questions about Jay?
No.
Okay. As far as you know, did anyone ever bother to call, Ruby Tuesdays, excuse me, where Jay worked to verify that he actually worked there?
No.
Okay. Did you later find out what Jay did that night?
Yes.
How did you find out?
I talked to Hakeem and
Talked to Hakeem Fudge.
Hakeem Fudge. He actually came over with Natasha, which is Jay's sister, and told us that they had went out and that him and Jay had split up to go home.
Mm-hmm. And again, you said that in terms of questioning, you were questioned for about 45 minutes on June 23rd of 2016 by police officers, and that's it.
Yes.
And that was by the Milwaukee Police Department.
Yes.
And other than that 45-minute interview, that 1 hour long interaction, so you were questioned for 45 minutes, right?
Yes.
And the police were at the house for how long?
A little bit over an hour.
Okay. And other than that initial interview and interaction with the police for an hour, nobody from the Milwaukee Police Department has ever come and questioned you again?
Correct.
Has anyone from the Milwaukee County District Attorney's Office come and questioned you?
No.
Ever?
No.
Has anyone from any federal agencies have come and questioned you ever?
No.
I have nothing further.
Thank you. You can step down. the mask back on.
Your Honor, our next witness is on Zoom.
Okay.
No, the gun wasn't loaded.
Maybe you want to close out your video.
Well, I'm gonna actually show a lot of exhibits for this witness.
Well, once you start doing that, I guess you could go back on, but
Okay. No problem.
You'll see in a video. I don't
at
know if
least
they'll
other
show it
people in the
here.
live stream can see the four.
If we'll be
cameras.
able to see it, but
And
we're gonna
just
release
to,
this video after this is
be
done.
clear,
You'll
the last
see the
exhibit
gun
that you
issue.
showed This young lady was marked as what?
Exhibit 42, pages 14 and 15.
All right.
We showed it in a previously
And Your Honor,
released
before I
video.
call this witness, I do want to sort of let everyone know that this next witness, we are going to show quite a bit of graphic photographs and also the video of the shooting, just so everyone is aware.
So
Who's testifying next?
The next witness is James Traynham.
in the video that
Yes,
we
sir.
released on the YouTube channel,
Yes, sir, I am. I'm coming up.
we highlighted part of the gun issue, and there's
Can
a
you raise your right hand, please?
second video that we'll
Do you
release.
solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Please spell and state your first and last name for the record.
James Trainum, spelled T as in Tom, Rainum.
And Mr. Traynham, let's talk about your background. Good morning.
Good morning.
Could you please explain to the court, how long have you been in law enforcement?
I was in law enforcement with the Metropolitan Police Department of Washington, D.C. for 27 years.
And are you currently in law enforcement?
No, not actively.
Okay. And what years were you in law enforcement?
I was hired in 1983 and retired in 2010.
Okay. And during that time, what were your positions?
Well, I began just like any other officer did. I was in uniform patrol. And I then, after 3 years, I went into investigative positions, which I stayed for the rest of my career. 17 of the last 17 years of that time, I spent with the homicide unit. I first worked active homicides, the ones that had just occurred. And then I was transferred over to the major case unit that worked more high profile cases and cold cases and things along that line. During the last 10 years that I worked there, I was also in charge of the Violent Crime Case Review Project. And that was a project that I had developed where we were not only looking at working on cases, but we were doing a systematic review of all homicide cases over 3 years old. The purpose of it was twofold. One, to identify cases that had fallen through the cracks and might benefit from advances in technology and things along that line. And two, identify problems with the investigative process that we would make recommendations on how to improve the process during that time.
So you would advise on how to have best practices for investigations. Is that accurate to say?
Yes, and I also develop programs to help teach those practices as well.
Okay. And have you ever worked on any homicide cases?
I worked on numerous homicide cases, both as a secondary support positions, as a primary investigator, and I both active and older cold cases as well.
Okay. And during that time of working on homicide cases and cold cases and in all your experience, have you ever been asked to testify in court?
Numerous times, yes.
But how many times?
God, I couldn't even count, probably 100, if not more. We're talking about grand jury, preliminary hearings, and of course, motions and trial testimony.
Okay. And have you ever worked as a trainer for officers on specifically with homicide cases?
Yes, I have. Primarily on how to avoid what we call investigative pitfalls, things that can get your investigation off track. And what I'm talking about is things like rushing to judgment, tunnel vision, confirmation bias, how those things impact how you evaluate evidence. And specifically, what I would talk about a lot of times is how that impacts how we interview people, how we interrogate people, and how we evaluate the information that we get to those people, get from those people.
Excuse me, are you filing a CV for this witness?
Yes,
Can I see it?
sure. I've already submitted it to the court. It's Exhibit 43.
Okay, I don't see that.
I submitted it hard copy yesterday.
Oh,
Sorry, old school.
so you can dig that up, Sharon, please. And what number did you say the CV was?
Exhibit 43.
All right, you can continue.
Now, Mr. Trainum, were you ever, what other work were you involved in?
Well, since I retired, I began consulting with lawyers, different organizations. I also have mostly on the wrongful conviction issues and helping along with case reviews in that area. I've also worked with police organizations like the Police Executive Research Forum, where we conducted reviews of homicide practices in various agencies across the country to make recommendations on how to improve practices. I worked and am currently working on projects with the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. I was asked to participate in a review of the New Orleans Police Department's policies, and also working currently in reference to a civil rights investigation involving the arrest of a person with disabilities. I've been working a lot more recently as part of a National Institute of Justice project where they're trying to promote research into what they call sentinel event reviews for law enforcement. And that's basically a methodology by which law enforcement will review what they call investigative failures and also mistakes, police shootings, things along that line. And I've not only participated in some of those reviews, mostly involving a wrongful arrest, but I've also participated in the research into that as well.
Okay. And have you ever been involved in any officer-involved shootings investigation?
Directly, no. I've assisted in some of them. My agency would have its own group of people who do that, but we would assist them as necessary. And also, I was trained as part of my homicide training in the investigation of those.
Okay. And you indicated that you've also worked for the Department of Justice. What did you do for them?
Okay, yes, with them, I helped to review the policies, specifically interrogation policies of the New Orleans Police Department as part of a consent decree. And like I said, right now, I'm assisting them in the review of a case involving the arrest of a person who had intellectual and developmental disabilities. I've also been involved in a lot of training, both before and after retirement, in which I train at law enforcement organizations and agencies, prosecutors, defense attorneys, and judges, law and criminal justice schools, in things that impact investigations adversely, such as I had talked about earlier.
Have you published any works?
I have. I've have a series of publications out, either primary or assisted. I actually co-authored a chapter in a book called Criminal Investigative Failures, where I highlighted how confirmation bias adversely impacted an investigation that I was in charge of, which resulted in a wrongful arrest. I wrote a chapter, article, a peer review article for the International Association of Chiefs of Police magazine on how confirmation bias can impact how statement evidence is evaluated. I wrote a book on how police, generate false confessions, which I also deal with these issues as well. And I recently wrote a article for legal and criminal psychology it's a Canadian magazine, and basically on how police should respond to interrogation failures, lessons learned from the use of force investigations.
Okay. Thank you. And have you ever provided testimony as a detective?
As a detective, yes, numerous times. Like I said, in various motion series about cases that I participated in, things like that.
Okay. And in what trials, prelims, grand juries?
That's correct.
Okay. Did you ever provide any testimony as a consultant?
I have. I've testified in jury trials. I've testified in motions hearings. I've also testified at post-conviction hearings, and I've given several depositions in civil cases.
Okay. Have you ever testified in the state of Wisconsin?
I have. That was a criminal case in Wisconsin involving a homicide case.
Okay. And have you ever been involved with any high-profile cases?
In DC, you really can't avoid it. Yes, I have been involved in several. The main one where I was the primary investigator was a case that's often referred to as the Starbucks triple murder. It was a robbery and murder of 3 Starbucks employees back in 1998, I believe. It was the first murder in any Starbucks and anywhere in the world.
Okay. Have you been involved in any other high-profile cases?
I was part of the DC sniper case. There was this case called the Chandra Levy case. It involved a missing intern that was dating a congressman during that time. But I was not really the primary on any of those. I just was involved.
Your Honor, at this point, I'd ask to submit Exhibit 43 into the court and to ask the court to allow this Mr. Train to be qualified as an expert for the purposes of this proceeding.
Expert in what?
An expert in police practices as well as police investigative techniques.
Not use of force.
Okay.
Is that right? I'm asking you.
Oh. Yes, also use of force.
And sir, if I understood you correctly, you've been doing this type of work since approximately 2010?
The consulting work, yes, sir.
That's when you retired from the police department?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever been found unqualified to testify as an expert in police practices or investigation techniques in any court in this country?
There were actually 2, and it wasn't really in police practices per se. One was in Michigan and one was in DC, and it was in reference to the area of false confessions specifically.
False confessions only?
That was the primary focus of my testimony at that time, though I would have gotten into the other areas. But the reason that I was ruled out was because of the science or the research behind false confessions.
And was that state court or federal court?
Both were state courts.
Counsel, if there have been any written decisions regarding those 2 cases he testified in, I'd like to see them. And sir, have you also testified previously on use of force?
Not specifically use of force, no, sir. I've been testified about homicide investigations and practices that occur. Now, I have testified as a detective in numerous shooting cases and homicides where self-defense was a claim, and that was an issue there. So whether or not use of force by somebody else, was appropriate.
Okay, I mean, I guess it's hard to say there's not overlap at some point between police practices and perhaps use of force in that context. Have you ever been found unqualified to testify as to use of force by any courts in this country?
No, sir.
And what would you estimate, in terms of a rough estimate, the number of cases that you've testified in or been retained as an expert regarding police practices or use of force since 2010?
I testified in jury trials approximately 8 times.
Any other types of proceedings that you recall?
Motions hearings twice, and on 2 of those, that's when I was let's say, eliminated because of the false confession issue. In post-conviction hearings 5 times, and civil depositions, I believe, around 9 times.
And again, through all 3 of those venues, jury trial, post-conviction, civil matters, you have not been disqualified in any other cases other than the 2 that you've referenced?
I'm sorry, there were 2 others in Chicago where I did not testify in a motions hearing, but it was just a blanket ruling on those 2 cases to exclude any testimony specifically about false confessions.
And in terms of these 3 venues, and really any that you've been retained on in connection with expert opinions regarding police practices or use of force, have these been exclusively for the defense, or have you also testified on behalf of prosecution?
Since I retired, it's only been for the defense.
All right, go ahead.
And Your Honor, just for the record, with regards to the 2 written decisions, I can give that to you this afternoon.
That's fine.
Okay. And
so let me just, I guess your last question was qualification.
Yes.
You know, everybody's qualified on a question-to-question basis as far as I'm concerned. So he's welcome to testify. If there are issues that I see, I guess I'll raise them. But you can proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Mr. Trainum, you indicated that you've been in law enforcement, you were a law enforcement officer for 27 years, correct?
That's correct.
And during that time, how many times did you fire your weapon?
None. Well, except on the range, none.
Okay, so while working in the line of duty, you never fired your weapon. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, has anybody paid you for your testimony today?
No, they have not.
Has anyone paid you, period, for in relation to this case at all?
No.
Do you know Officer Joseph Mensah?
No, I do not.
Have you ever worked with anyone within the Wauwatosa Police Department?
No, I have not.
Have you worked with anyone within the Milwaukee Police Department?
No, I have not.
Have you worked with anyone within the Milwaukee District Attorney's Office?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, thank you. I'd ask the court to, if they could please move into evidence, Exhibit 43, which is James Trainum's CV.
Call received 43.
Thank you. Let's see. Okay. Now, you talked a little bit about confirmation bias. It sounds as though that's an area that you have spent a lot of time focusing on. Could you please explain to the court what confirmation bias is?
Well, yes. Oftentimes, before I get into that specifically, oftentimes it's used interchangeably with tunnel vision. But basically, for the purposes of what I'm going to talk about, they're 2 separate things. Tunnel vision is basically when you identify one theory or one belief to the exclusion of others, and you begin to focus in on that one theory or that one belief. The problem, which is necessary in any investigation, because you may have several theories to begin with, but as the evidence narrows down, you're going to begin to focus in on that. The problem is with confirmation bias is that you then selectively begin to pick and choose your evidence to supports your belief, and you ignore, disregard, or maybe misinterpret the evidence that does not support that belief. And that's when you get into dangerous ground and you start having problems.
And have you ever seen confirmation bias in investigations?
I have seen it and I have experienced it myself, yes.
Okay. Now, with regards to the JayAnderson shooting of 2016, have you reviewed the Milwaukee Police Department police reports exhibit 42, the 172-page investigative report of JayAnderson?
Yes, I have.
With regards to your testimony today, have you reviewed Officer Joseph Mensah's personnel file?
Yes.
With regards to your testimony today, have you reviewed Exhibit 45, the District Attorney's Kent Laverne letter regarding Joseph Mensah?
Yes.
Regarding your testimony today, have you reviewed crime scene photographs that were taken by the Milwaukee Police Department?
Yes.
Have you reviewed Milwaukee Police Department photographs of the car, the inside of the car?
Yes.
Have you reviewed the interview of Chief Weber, exhibit number 1, with Steve Biskubich on September 21st, 2020?
Yes.
Thank you. Now let's talk about investigations in general. So you've done a lot of training on investigations and how police officers are supposed to conduct thorough investigations. Is that accurate to say?
Yes, it is.
And what are some things that should be required of a good investigation, especially as it relates to a homicide case?
Well, basically any case. I mean, they all have a lot of similarities on how they should be conducted. And the first one, of course, is to always maintain an open mind. Investigations are, you can kind of consider them like scientific research, in that what you're trying to do is you identify a question or an issue. You then begin to gather all the information and evidence that you can, and then you start to develop theories that initially fit that evidence. And that's what we pretty much do in investigations, and that's how we begin to kind of narrow down our focus. But in order to avoid confirmation bias, what we should do then is we begin to seek information that to test that theory rather than to confirm the theory. And one of the ways that we do that is a crime scene analysis. The crime scene analysis is extremely important. A good crime scene analysis is very important because that's when you're able to develop what hard facts, based on the physical evidence and things along that line, like the number of shell casings, the placement of bullet holes, things like that, and versus soft evidence, which is witness statements that might be more subjective. You use that hard evidence to then evaluate the statements of witnesses, suspects, victims, and all of that. Such as if a witness tells you something, you then compare it to the crime scene analysis, and you also go check it out yourself. If they say that they saw something from a certain location, you go stand at that location just to confirm. What you're constantly doing is you're not taking anything at face value. You're attempting to confirm what that person is telling you through independent evidence. You also try to create a timeline of events, and because that helps you quite a lot in trying to figure out exactly what happened when, who could see what, and also a timeline of the investigation is very important. What that does is if you know what information becomes available when, then it helps you, and what decisions were based on what information. It helps you, or the person reviewing the case, it helps them determine, okay, is confirmation bias a possible issue here? Because the evidence, the final decision should be based on all the evidence and not the order in which it came in. So if evidence A and B led to decision X, then evidence C came in. If you move evidence C in front, would it have changed that decision X? And if it should have, but it didn't, then that's something that you need to consider. That's a red flag that you want to look at. You also want to examine the victim in the case, do a good victimology, their background, things about them as much as you can find out, and also the subject or the suspect in the case as well, just to see what about their background might have contributed somehow to their actions that they took that led up to this incident.
Okay. And what are the basic steps to an investigation?
Well, basically, once you determine, who's going to handle the investigation, you try to secure the crime scene as much as possible, collect the evidence, identify who the witnesses are, and then you kind of start that process that I was talking about. A lot of times it's fragmented, and the evidence is coming in piecemeal, it's coming in quickly, and you start making your decisions oftentimes based on incomplete and sometimes inaccurate information. But as new information comes in, that should be a self-correcting process, because as new information comes in, you then go back, you may want to re-interview witnesses to try to clear up discrepancies or questions that you were not aware of in the first part of an investigation.
So you want to evaluate what you collect?
Yes, as it comes in, you evaluate it, and then you compare it to what you already know, and then you decide what you need to do at that point.
Okay. And then after the evaluation, then you take the collection of the evidence,
right?
Evaluate the evidence, and what do you do with that?
The evaluation of the evidence is you're trying to determine its reliability. Like I said, if a witness tells you something, you're going to start looking at the hard evidence. Does it match? You're going to go stand where the witnesses said that they stood, things along that line. Is it something that you can rely on? And then the final part is you analyze it and how it fits into the scenario of a crime itself, and you then move on from there.
So there's a collection stage, an evaluation stage, and analysis stage. Is that accurate?
That's correct. And when investigations get into problems, it's usually in one of those one or more of those stages. And things like a rush to judgment, tunnel vision, and confirmation bias, those three things have been found through the study of numerous investigative failures. They've been found to be the major factors that contribute to evidence failures.
How important is it to, in this type of investigation, to look at the victim, to investigate the victim? Is that important?
Well, it's important pretty much in any investigation, and it's something that we unfortunately don't do a very good job of, in my experience. But you want to know, about the victim, what caused them to be where they were, their mindset at the time, anything that might have contributed to the event, or contributed to what the suspect did during the event.
So is, for instance, understanding who the person lived with, is that important?
It can be, yes. You don't know until you really get into it and figure out, and so that takes a lot of digging, a lot of times, a lot of questioning, things along that line.
Okay, so at a basic, it sounds like that might be important.
Yes.
Okay. How important is it to understand the suspect that's involved in a homicide investigation?
Well, very important, especially if there's like a claim of self-defense or something along that line. You want to know, in the case of a police officer, let's say, what their training was, what their thought process was, what they thought or what they knew going into the situation, and what their impressions were, and why they did certain things that they did. All of that, were they having a bad day? Do they have problems with anger management or whatever? Do they have problems drinking? All that stuff can play a very important part depending on the circumstances.
So it's also important to know from for instance, this situation, who, for instance, Officer Joseph Mensah worked with, his colleagues, his boss, things like that are also important to inform this investigation. Is that accurate?
Well, they can tell you an awful lot about his personality, how he's dealt with similar situations, good things, bad things, all that stuff. Yes.
Okay. And it's also important to understand as much about the suspect as it is about the victim. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, because I think we miss out a lot when we don't, know about the victim's past, about their, what had happened within the time leading up to the event. Medical issues, drug, alcohol issues, mental state, all that stuff.
So all that's very important to inform the investigation that you're conducting.
If you're doing a thorough investigation, yes. If you're trying to, cover all your bases and see where the evidence is going to take you, it is.
Okay, to make sure there's no confirmation bias, basically.
Well, yes, and to, like I said, just to make sure that you have all the facts before you start coming to your final conclusion.
Okay. I want to note for the record that it is now 11 a.m. Let's get into the collection as it relates to this case. All right?
Okay.
So let's start with Exhibit 32, the shooting of Jay Anderson. Can you see it?
I can.
Exhibit 32 is video?
Yes, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
All right. And if you would make a record as to what portion you played.
Okay, no problem, Your Honor. And for the record, I played the video Exhibit 32, the first 45 seconds of the video. Now, with regards to the shooting, you've heard from Starkeisha De La Rosa today, and she indicated that she was one of the last people to see Jay Anderson on June 22nd. Is it important to talk to her?
Yes.
Do you think it was important to, see what room they stayed in, for instance?
You don't know until you do, because the best way to miss evidence is not to look for it. There may have been something in there. I've always liked to find out as much as I can about my victims, and one of the things that I would typically do is go view the area where they lived and even search their rooms to see if there's anything that might be of use to the investigation. But she would definitely give you information about his mindset, what he was doing, their relationship, things along that line.
Okay. So keeping in mind that we're at the collection stage, let's look at Madison Park, an aerial view. So what I'm going to pull up is Exhibit 35, which is a photograph of a Google aerial view of Madison Park. Can you see that?
I still see the film clip.
All right.
I see it now. Yes.
Okay. So, Your Honor, this is Exhibit 35, the aerial photo of Madison Park.
All right.
So looking at this photograph, do you see where my plus sign is?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so that's marked as West Glendale Avenue. Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, it looks like that's the main road that leads into the park. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And it looks like that's the only way into the park from the main road.
By road, yes.
Okay. So in order to drive in Madison Park, you would presumably need to drive down Glendale Avenue,
Yes.
correct? Okay. Now let's look at Exhibit 36.
Oh, wait a minute. Is there a date in connection with this photo, or?
I'm sorry. We pulled this photo off of Google Maps.
Okay.
So it's a recent photo of Madison Park that we pulled off February 25th, 2021.
Right, so there's no relevance then to the what appears to be a vehicle and possibly individuals in the middle of that parking lot.
That's correct.
All right.
Now what I want to do is I want to do a side-by-side of Exhibit 35 and Exhibit 36. So I'll leave 35 up. Let's see, hopefully this will let me do it. So Exhibit 36 was taken by the Milwaukee Police Department on the early morning of June 23rd, 2016. Do you see that, Mr. Traina?
I do not, but I remember the picture.
Okay, hold on. I think I have to keep sharing and stop
I
sharing.
mean, we don't have to side by side. You can just put the other one on.
Yeah.
All right. It's important for this testimony, Your Honor.
All right.
So we're looking at Exhibit 36, the actual photograph taken by the Milwaukee Police Department. Do you see where my plus sign is?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So that's Glendale Avenue, presumably, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So that's the main road that everyone has to drive to Madison Park, what I'm showing on Exhibit 36.
Yes.
Okay. And as you can see on Exhibit 35, that's the Glendale Avenue.
Yes.
Okay. So looking at these two photographs, do you see the vehicle that's to my right and probably to your right looking at it? The furthest right-hand vehicle, it looks like it's a black sedan. Do you see that with the doors open?
Yes.
Okay. And that vehicle is JayAnderson, the vehicle that JayAnderson was driving on June 23rd, correct?
Yes, my
A little bigger.
Sorry. So yes, you're saying this is JayAnderson's vehicle, the vehicle that's to the right side of this photograph, the black sedan.
Right, based on the photograph and the diagrams and stuff that I saw.
Okay. And to facing this vehicle is looks like an SUV, a police SUV with the lights on.
Yes.
On top. And that police car that's facing the black sedan with the lights on, that's Officer Joseph Mensah's car that he was driving that night. Correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. Now looking at this photograph, well, let me come back to that. And you do see also that there's other police cars that are also in the Madison Park area.
Yes.
Okay, so it's a pretty wide open space, right?
It looks to be pretty big, a lot of space there.
Okay. And it's not like it's a road that people just, you have to intentionally, when you looking at the aerial photo, which is why I want to do it side by side in Exhibit 35, people that are driving to Madison Park, clearly they're trying to come into Madison Park. They're not.
That's what it looks like to me, yes.
Okay. So let's look at Exhibit 20. Exhibit 20 is a police report written by Wauwatosa police officer John Cutts, and he went through the surveillance at Madison Elementary School.
Now, I don't have that on my screen, but I can access it if you just give me the page number, and I can just refer to it myself if you like.
Okay.
Okay.
That would be on page 166. This will be easier. Let's refer to Exhibit 42, page 166.
Which is the first page of that report, correct?
That's correct. So what we're seeing is this is a 4-page report that begins on page 166, authored by Wauwatosa Police Officer John Cutts.
Yes, I'm looking at that now.
I believe it's Joel Cutts,
Oh, Joel Cutts, sorry.
K-U-T-Z.
So, and I'm sorry, we're going to have to keep sort of jumping back and forth. But looking at, again, Exhibit 35, I want to be clear. I don't know if you can you see my screen?
No, I can help.
Okay, Exhibit 35, do you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. So where Glendale Avenue is, this parking lot that you see my plus sign circling it?
Yes,
So that's the parking lot of Madison Elementary School. Is that correct?
that's my understanding. Yes.
Okay. So there somewhere in this area, presumably to the right of the parking lot, there's a video camera of the school.
I thought that the video camera was on the side of the school. That was the impression that I got, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
Well,
So
either way, I don't need him to guess about it. because
okay,
I don't-
that's true. So somewhere in this area at Madison Park Elementary School, Joel Cutts received an elementary video.
That's correct.
Okay. So looking at page 166 of Exhibit 42, it's noted that at 1:06 a.m., a marked City of Wauwatosa police SUV can be observed driving through Madison parking lot and then leaving the area. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay. So we're going to come back to that, but let's skip ahead.
I thought you said Exhibit 42. This is Exhibit 20, is it not?
It's both. Exhibit 20, let me just tell you what happened. So Exhibit 42 is the entire 172-page Milwaukee Police Department police report. Exhibit 20, I took out the 4-page and made it its own exhibit. So for the purposes for the last hearing.
Okay.
So for today, I'm just going to refer to Exhibit 42
All right.
to make things easier. So on page 167, Exhibit 42, it marks that at 3:01 a.m., a marked City of Wauwatosa police SUV squad can be observed entering the Madison Park parking lot through Glendale Avenue. Is that
Yes,
correct?
that's correct.
And then at 3:06 and 42 seconds, near the upper left of the screen, a series of small flashes can be seen, which is consistent with muzzle flashes based on Officer Cutts' training and experience can be observed on the camera.
That's correct.
So according to the Madison Park video, Officer Joseph Mensah was there for 5 minutes and 35 seconds. Is that correct?
Until the shots were fired, yes.
And just to backtrack, this video was obtained by at Madison Elementary School, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And according to this police report, it states that Officer Cutts was instructed by Detective Lieutenant Mastrocola, who's a detective with the Wauwatosa Police Department, to retrieve this footage.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Should that have happened? Is it okay for the Wauwatosa Police Department to have retrieved this video?
Yes. I know that the policies that are in place in that agency at the time or in Wisconsin is that another agency be brought in to to investigate police shootings. Now, I'm going to qualify that, yes. There are times, of course, they should be doing all the interviews. They should be doing all of the evidence collection, things along that line. They may need to resort to somebody who may have special access to something. But when they do so, it would be more appropriate for them to have somebody there with him at the time that it was collected. So, I mean, them asking him for assistance in collecting evidence based on his special knowledge or special relationship with the school that's just the raw data. But it would have been more appropriate. It would have been better optics if they had somebody there with him at the time of the collection.
Okay. And so in terms of who should ask him, you're saying that the lead investigator went to Officer Cutts and said, hey, could you get this video? Even though he's with Wauwatosa, that's fine.
Well, yes, because it appears like he has some kind of special relationship with the school. He knows maybe how their system works, and he could probably cut through some of the red tape and get him exactly what he needed.
Okay. And so Luke O'Day was the lead investigator of this investigation, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So when it says that Officer Cutts is Lieutenant Master Cola, who's not the lead investigator, and who works with Wauwatosa Police Department, when he's the one that's instructing it, that's not appropriate, correct?
That's a problem, yes. Unless for some reason he got a request from Milwaukee, but that's not indicated here.
And if he had gotten a request from Milwaukee, that would have been, presumably, that's something you should write in a report, correct?
I would say so, because, and also, like, I think it would be more appropriate based on the circumstances and based on the way that their policies and procedures were written, that somebody from Milwaukee be there to take custody of the tape once it was recorded.
Okay. Now let's look at Exhibit 42, page 68.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And does that have another number on it too?
Nope. Exhibit 42, page 68. Oh, I'm sorry. It also is, you're right. If you have the whole police report, yeah, there you go. So on page 68, it's written, this report is written by Luke O'Day, Milwaukee Police Officer Luke O'Day.
Yes.
Correct? And in this police report, Luke O'Day essentially is adopting what Police Officer Cutts has observed as it relates to the Madison Elementary video.
Yes.
Okay. Would it have been important for Luke O'Day to also look at the video himself and create his own report?
Well, he did view the video, and apparently he compared it to Officer Cutts' report. And he said that he believed that the observations were accurately reported. The problem that I have with that is, of course, Officer Cutts reported. The problem I have with that is looking at the timeline of what occurred that night. There appears to be some things that should have been observations that would have been made that were left out of Officer Cutts' report. Okay. So I think it would have been a better practice for Detective O'Day to have reviewed the report, to review the tape independently, so that he would not have been influenced by Officer Cutts' own observations.
Okay, thank you. So there's some issues with Officer Luke O'Day, Detective Luke O'Day, not independently viewing the video without Officer Cutts' report next to him. Is that accurate?
Yes, because he could be, well, one, he could be lazy and not want to do his own report and just say, could just adopt it. And two, because he's focusing on what Officer Cutts saw, he might miss things that he would have independently seen.
Mm-hmm. And this goes into your confirmation bias issues, potentially, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So let's go to Exhibit 37.
The point of
which
that,
is
both
a
those
photograph
reports are
of
the
Jay
same.
Anderson's car.
Both those reports say the same exact thing. So it alleges that Milwaukee copied Tosa's report.
I'm going to share my screen. Do you see the photograph?
I do.
Okay. And based on this photograph, you see that the front, the driver's side window is up, correct?
It looks like it's down a little bit, but it's up.
Okay, yeah, it's partially down.
Right.
And you see that the window behind the driver's seat is shot out,
Yes.
correct? Okay. And so this is Exhibit 37. So let's go to Exhibit 38. Okay. So this Exhibit 38 is another photograph at Madison Park.
I don't
Correct.
see it.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
It keeps sharing and not sharing. Do you see that photograph?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And well, it looks like in the middle of the photograph is a black sedan with the door open. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And that is Jay Anderson Jr.'s car, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you can see in the front of his car, there's no license plate, correct?
That's correct.
Was that confirmed that he didn't have any license plates in any of the reports that you read?
Yeah, one of the reports that I read, they described the vehicle and said that there was no front license plated.
Okay. But we do know that Officer Mensah at some point called in the license plate, correct?
Yes, he did.
Okay. And again, facing this black sedan, it looks like there's this SUV that's to the right of it. That presumably is Officer Joseph Mensah's car, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So let's go back to Exhibit 35. Actually, I'm sorry. Let's do Exhibit 36. All right. Let's see. So, Rebecca, Exhibit 36 is the photograph of Jay and Mensah's car parked, correct?
Yeah.
At Madison Park.
Yes.
And again, we see Jay's car to the right, and there's a black, what looks like a white license plate or a white object. That's his license.
That's correct.
Okay. So so we know that Jay Anderson obviously drove to Madison Park first, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so when he drove in, he drove down where my plus sign is, down Glendale Avenue. And then he drove and he parked at some point to where his car is on this picture, correct?
That's correct.
And so the only way that Officer Mensah could have drove into Madison Park was down that same road that Jay Anderson drove in, correct?
Yes.
So he drove in, and at some point at 3:01 a.m.
Yes.
And at some point, he called in Jay Anderson Jr.'s license plate.
Yes.
Correct? So that means either he would have had to drive his car behind Jay Anderson, or he would have had to park his car and walk behind Jay Anderson's car in order to call in the license plate. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And there's really, from the time that the school the school surveillance has him driving in until he first acknowledges that, or he tells the dispatcher that that there was a occupied vehicle in the park. That's like a 2-minute time period right there.
And that was in the beginning when Officer Mensah drove in at 3:01. between 301 and 303,
Yes,
he called into dispatch
yes.
the driver's the license plate.
Well, actually, he called in and he said that that there was a vehicle parked, an occupied vehicle parked in there. And then less than a minute later, that's when he gave the tag number.
Now, would this qualify as a traffic stop?
Yes, it would.
And why is that?
It has all the dynamics of a traffic stop in that you're encountering a subject that is in a vehicle. And it's just like, the argument may be that this isn't on a road or anything like that, and that the vehicle was not moving when encountered by the officer, but you would still do the same thing if you were driving down a highway and you saw a vehicle pulled over to the side of the road and you pulled over behind them to check on the occupant or whatever. It's the same dynamics, the same mechanics, and there is nothing different about how this vehicle should have been approached than in a traffic stop.
Okay, so this is a traffic stop, correct?
Yes, sorry, I get it.
No problem. And we know that we presume that Officer Mensah's lights on the top of his car are on. And what are these lights called on the top?
Well, there's two different types of lights. Typically, there's the emergency lights, the red or blue lights that are flashing. And then there's also these takedown lights that they're talking about, like floodlights that are just very, very bright and are meant to light up a scene.
Okay. And we know that, so let's go to Exhibit 44.
Thank you.
Now, with the way that Officer Mensah was parked at 3:01 a.m. until he was shooting JayAnderson at 3:06 a.m., Officer Mensah was not recording, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, according to Exhibit 44, this is the Wauwatosa Police Department in-squad digital video system. They're part of their policies and procedures. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
Now, if we go down, let's go down to page 2, Roman numeral 3, where it says procedure A1. Let's look at the last sentence. Well, actually, let's look at the second last sentence of Roman numeral 3, subsection A1. It says, the system will also start automatically with the activation of the squad's emergency lights or when the squad reaches a speed of 65 miles per hour. The camera must be recording when the vehicle's emergency lights are activated or the squad reaches a speed of 65 miles per hour for the following. And subsection C says, during all traffic stops. So based on this procedure with the Wauwatosa Police Department, should Officers Mensah's emergency lights, should they have been engaged?
Yes, they should have for several reasons, but yes.
And at least for this reason, once he engages or once he starts his emergency lights, the squad automatically starts recording, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now you mentioned that his emergency lights should have been on for several reasons. Why?
Well, not several, I would say a couple. Well, just as a comment, Officer Mensah, in his first statements on the scene, said that he did try to activate the camera. He tried a couple of times, but it failed for some reason. And but that was never followed up on right there. But if you're approaching somebody in this sort of situation, one of the reasons for the emergency lights is not only to protect yourself from other cars coming up, but in this case, to alert the person that you are a police officer. I mean, it's dark. You might not be able to see the markings of the car, but the emergency lights notifies that person that you're a law enforcement officer and you have a reason to be there and come in contact with them. It's part of the safety.
Okay. And how important is safety for officers?
It's drilled into their head to keep themselves safe, that there's certain measures that you take to minimize the danger to yourself and to others.
Okay. So just to be clear, Officer Mensah did not turn on his emergency lights and he did not record, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now let's look at the same procedure and let's go down.
We could just clarify here, when you testified that the officer made an attempt to activate his camera, that was the lapel or camera on his person, not the camera in the squad, correct, sir?
That's my understanding. He said that he had attempted early on to activate it a couple times and it just didn't work.
Okay, go ahead.
Now let's go down to page 3 of this same document. Where on big C, where it's labeled wearing of the wireless microphone. It states, officers are to wear the wireless microphone during the entire time they are on duty. Officers will be required to ensure that the microphone is powered on in order to record audio on the following. Number 1, during all traffic stops. Did Officer Mensah turn on his microphone during this traffic stop?
Not until the very end.
Not until after he had shot and killed JayAnderson, correct?
That's correct.
So Officer Mensah, according to policies and procedures, at least this policy, the in-squad digital video recording, had 2 ways that he was supposed to be recording this traffic stop, correct?
That's correct.
Number 1, he was supposed to record it by putting on his emergency lights, which he didn't do that, right?
Right.
And the second way he was supposed to record the audio was by turning on his wireless microphone, which he also didn't do that until after he killed JayAnderson, correct?
That's correct.
Why do you think that happened? I know you can't answer that.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That was a question. That's one of the questions that I believe has gone unanswered.
Okay. Oops. So let's go to Exhibit 34. Wauwatosa's Police Department Vehicle Contacts Training. Now, this part of this training has been redacted. I'm looking to get the entire training before the next court hearing. But
It's still
according
not
to,
up.
sorry, let me
Okay.
share. Sharing and unsharing. According to this vehicle contacts training on page, let's see, 26, page 26.
I don't see any page markers here.
I'm sorry. Yeah. What page 25 is marked, Your Honor.
Okay.
I know it's. I didn't want to manipulate it because I just gave it to you the way that I received it. I'm sorry.
All right. All right, go ahead.
All right. Now, according to this vehicle contacts training, there's a diagram about how, an officer should have approached the car or have parked his car, correct?
Yes.
And in this diagram, there's a police car that's behind a vehicle,
Yes.
right? And we know that where it says police, that's the back of the police car, correct?
That's correct.
And then we have another vehicle that's in front of it, and we know that that's the back of that car, correct?
Yes.
Is that the way Officer Mensah parked his car with JayAnderson?
No.
Why is it important that Mensah have followed the training and procedures according to the vehicle contacts training?
Well, it would have been an extra safety step that may have prevented the shooting to begin with. we take steps, that there are various steps that we take that lead up to the incident. And sometimes these kind of compound on each other and just make the problem worse. By not taking this step, what he did was he lost the tactical advantage that this positioning provides for you. The officer's car being over to the side, that not only protects him from oncoming traffic, which is not an issue here, but let's say that the officer needs to take cover. He can be behind the door, but not only is the door protecting him, but part of the engine block of his car in case anybody from the vehicle that he stopped gets out and begins to shoot at him. The distance prevents the car in front from suddenly backing up into you and crushing you between their car and your car, so that you have time to react just in case something like that does occur.
Okay, thank you. So is
Plus,
it fair to
plus, I'm sorry,
Right.
one more thing. Plus, approaching the car from this way tactically, it places the driver at a very big disadvantage because they need to twist and look back at you in order to really do anything if they intended to do something to you. And that gives you, that allows you to see, alert you that they're doing something that that might be a red flag.
Okay. And typically when an officer, parks his car correctly, when he's conducting a traffic stop, like Officer Mensah was, he would come out of his driver's side and then approach the suspect or the vehicle on the driver's side as well, correct?
Most places do that. Some talk about going to the passenger side, but that's also because of oncoming traffic. But most of the training that I've seen, you go to the driver's side because, like I said, it's much more difficult for the driver to take some kind of offensive action if you're at that position.
Right. Because officer safety is number one most important, correct?
That is what they teach, yes.
So we know that at some point, looking at Exhibit 36, that at some point Officer Mensah was behind JayAnderson's car, correct?
Yes, he had to have been behind his car in order to get the tag number.
But for some reason, he decided not to park behind the car, which would have been consistent with his training, correct?
That's correct.
And also just looking at the vehicle context training, if an officer gets out of his driver's side, you don't necessarily want to, cross into this area because then it is a safety issue, right?
It's a safety issue.
Yeah,
Definitely.
this area being the distance between the two vehicles.
That's correct.
Thank you. So let's look at Exhibit 49 or 59. Exhibit 59 is dated June 24th, 2016. It's the interview with Luke O'Day to Officer Joseph Mensah.
I'm sorry, the report date on what I'm looking at says June 29th of 2016, the top right.
Sorry, that's what time, I guess, he got it approved. But if you look at on Friday, June 24th, 2016.
Okay.
So according to this report, Detective Luke O'Day interviewed Joseph Mensah the following day after the shooting, correct? On June 24th.
That's correct.
And that interview was conducted at the Wauwatosa Police Department, right?
Yes.
Should it have been conducted there?
That might have been something that was let's say, negotiated with Officer Mensah's attorneys and things along that line. It would have been preferable to have it done at the Milwaukee Police Department, just simply because, I mean, when you interview persons of interest or whatever, you typically don't interview them at their house or something along that line. You typically interview them in your own space so that you have more control over the situation. And so it would have been preferable to have done the interview at Milwaukee, but I don't know, but they don't document the circumstances as to why it was done here.
Okay. And typically, do you want should interviews be recorded, especially an interview of a suspect?
Yes, any interview like this, I mean, even the International Association of Chiefs of Police's model policies in reference to police units recommends that all interviews, especially interviews like this, be recorded. You want to be able to make sure, just have a better idea what questions were asked, how they were answered, what the interaction was between the two, between the interviewer and the interviewee, and you just get a lot more accurate account of the information that was said. Unfortunately, there have been studies done comparing police reports to videotaped interviews, and of course, the officer doesn't remember everything that is said, but they also tend to slant it unconsciously, based on their interpretations or their perception or their earlier confirmation bias.
Okay. And if they asked for the interview to be recorded, and if he refused, that should be noted in the report, right?
I would definitely have expected that.
If they asked, who's they?
Sorry. If the Milwaukee Police Department officer, specifically Detective Luke O'Day, asked to record the interview and Officer Mensah refused, that is something that should be noted in the report, correct?
Yes.
And is that noted in the report?
No.
So presumably, Detective Luke O'Day never asked Joseph Mensah if he can record this interview.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, also present at this interview were his attorney Heller and attorney Schwartz and a Wauwatosa Police Department union representative, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And is that typical to have, two lawyers and a union representative present during an interview with the police?
The union representative and a lawyer, yes. That's oftentimes written into the contract or written into the policies and procedures of the department. Two lawyers, I guess that depends on the working relationship between the attorneys and whomever. So.
Okay. So you said the written into the contract often to have the union representative and a lawyer present for an officer interrogation, correct?
They're allowed to be, of course, the attorney is of course allowed to be present, but the union rep, usually if the officer requests a union representative to be there, they're allowed to be there.
But the Wauwatosa Police Department is different than the Milwaukee Police Department, correct?
That's correct.
So Milwaukee Police Department doesn't necessarily have to follow the Wauwatosa Police Department policies and procedures, correct?
That's correct.
So if it actually is in the union contract, then the Milwaukee Police Department should have asked to view the union contract to make sure that's accurate, correct?
They might have known. I don't know. But yes, they should have, had prior knowledge to know whether or not that was appropriate based on the contracts. Yes.
I'm sorry, was there some provision in the union contract prohibiting audio or video recording of interview?
Not that I'm aware of.
Oh, okay.
And they never bothered to ask.
Okay.
Thank you. And that's a good question, Your Honor. As far as you know, there's nothing in the Wauwatosa Police Department contract that prohibits this interview to have been recorded. Is that correct?
I don't know anything like that. That's correct.
Okay. And typically, these interrogations of homicide investigations, when you're interviewing a suspect, typically those are recorded from your experience.
More so now than they've ever been. I am not aware of, some departments have different policies and procedures and all that, but more and more homicide suspects, especially, they're videotaped during the interview.
Okay. And in this interview, did Officer Mensah ever mention to Detective Luke O'Day that his wireless microphone recording was not working?
No, he did not.
In this interview, did Officer Mensah ever explain to Detective Luke O'Day why he didn't turn on his emergency lights for a traffic stop?
I should clarify that. Based on the documentation, no.
Sorry, based on the documentation, could you?
Yes, well, if he did ask him, it wasn't documented. So all I can go is, based on the documentation, he was not asked that.
Okay. And so based on the documentation, he was not asked why he didn't immediately record on his wireless microphone for the traffic stop of JayAnderson.
That's correct.
Okay. And based on, sorry.
And there was no inquiry made about his earlier statement about when he was asked if he had turned his microphone or his car camera on, he had tried to, but it malfunctioned.
Okay. We'll get to that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem. And based on this interview, and according to this report, Exhibit 59, written by Detective Luke O'Day, Detective Luke O'Day never asked him, based on this report, why he didn't turn on his emergency lights for this traffic stop. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay.
Oh, shit. Sorry.
Now, this interview, it started at 9:50 a.m., correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, in this report, if we go to the last page, page 3, last full paragraph.
Yes.
It starts with Officer Mensah stated he had conducted an earlier park check around 12:30 a.m. He had encountered 2 vehicles after closing hours. When he turned his squad lights on, 1 vehicle immediately exited the park. Do you see that?
Yes.
So according to this, Officer Mensah at 12:30 encountered 2 vehicles. And for those interactions, he turned on his squad lights.
Yes.
Is there anything in this report where Luke O'Day asked him, why did you turn your squad lights on for that traffic stop at 12:30, but you didn't turn your squad lights on for the traffic stop of JayAnderson?
And yes, and that's something that jumped out at me is why did they not explore what was the difference between the 2 incidents? You know, why did he treat one differently than the other? Especially since he apparently stayed in his car while somebody walked up to him and had a conversation with him. What was it about those 2? You know, why did he handle this one this way and the other one the other way? That was not explored in the interview itself.
That was not explored in this conversation.
That's correct.
Okay. And he's saying that this happened at 12:30 a.m.
Oh, that's correct.
Okay.
Well, I suppose it's more accurate to say we don't know what was explored since nothing was recorded or on video or audio. I think the better phraseology would be it's not contained in the report.
Yes, you're right.
And for the record, it's now 11:47 a.m. According to this report, this interview was concluded at 10:37 a.m., correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So you and I have been talking about collection for 47 minutes, right?
Yes.
And this interview of Joseph Mensah was conducted and happened for 47 minutes too, correct?
Oh, that's clever.
Correct.
Did anyone within the Milwaukee Police Department, and according to the reports, ever bother to go back and talk to Joseph Mensah?
There is no documentation of that.
So this is literally the only time that anyone with the Milwaukee Police Department interviewed Joseph Mensah.
That's yes.
And according to the 172-page Milwaukee Police Department report, Exhibit 34, as far as you know, was there any federal law enforcement officers that ever went back and talked to Joseph Mensah?
No.
And according to the 172-page report, was there anyone from the district attorney's office that bothered to talk to Joseph Mensah ever?
No.
So as far as we know, the only time that Mensah was talked to was for that 47 minutes the day after JayAnderson was shot and killed, correct?
That's correct.
And that's it.
Yes.
She timed
Now
it.
let's talk about what he said.
Now, mind you, they talked
Because
to the
even in that
girlfriend.
interview, he said some very inconsistent things, correct?
for more time.
Yes.
Okay. So let's go to, back to John Kutz's report.
How much,
Joe Cutts.
how much time do you think you're gonna need to, finish this witness's testimony?
I'm gonna need it over an hour. I'm gonna need quite a bit of time with him.
All right, I think we're gonna break at this point. Since we're entering another subject, line of questioning, I'm just checking to see if my court reporter availability is for the afternoon. Doesn't look like we got anything here. So my intention will be to resume testimony at 1 o'clock this afternoon. And we'll take a mid-afternoon break. Otherwise, we'll at least run until 4:30. Okay?
Thank you, Your Honor.
So if you want to zoom in just before 1 o'clock, sir, we'll get you back on and continue the hearing. All right, that's going to conclude the morning session. The live stream will recommence about 1 o'clock this afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks.
Interesting. All right. Let's see if we can move my background up. All right. I'm just going to spend a short time talking. I'm not going to stay live for this whole time. All right. For those of you watching, though, let's do this. I don't have any of my backdrops up. All right. So those of you that are watching, some of you had some questions. I'll do my best to clarify. So if you have questions about what you heard, now's the time. And I'm going to end up jumping off after this, and then we'll come back for the next portion of testimony. We'll post this up again. We didn't live stream the last hearing date because I was there, but we did write a very detailed article based on pages and pages of notes that I took. So if you haven't read that article, that's this link here. That'll kind of catch you up a bit. That article as well as others is on our website here. I'm just gonna post some links to different things. We do have some donation links, not to sound disheartening, but this obviously does help us continue to do this type of stuff. So once again, if you guys do have questions, start typing them, because I'm not going to spend too much time live unless there's some questions. But we will come back in another live stream of this around 1 o'clock once they reconvene. Yeah, can you, April, just because it's somewhere back there. I'm trying to like scroll to find it. Oh, you said, how can someone influence what you are seeing with your own eyes? So it's just like a weird like trick of the brain. So if I have a video loaded up on the screen and then I have a report in front of me, some type of documentation, telling me what I'm seeing, it sort of tricks your brain to focus in only on those elements as opposed to the totality of what you're viewing on a picture or a video. The report is telling you, I saw this, and by you reading that, looking at a picture or looking at a video, that's most times that's what you tend to only focus on then instead of all of the other things. What should have happened based on investigatory procedures is that the Milwaukee detective should have viewed, in this case, a video, but whether it's a picture or a video, should have viewed that independently and wrote down what he observed and then compared that with the Wauwatosa police report. So that's kind of a big deal. And by not viewing that independently, it sounds like, and you guys have not seen the reports, but the Wauwatosa report and the Milwaukee report, it appears to be that the Milwaukee officer copied exactly what the Tosa officer wrote in the report. There's really nothing different about the Milwaukee report. So that's kind of a big deal. In a lot of the reports between Wauwatosa and Milwaukee, what a lot of these reports appear to be is Milwaukee essentially didn't do much of the actual investigation because Wauwatosa did so much of it. So what it seems like is Milwaukee essentially just copy and pasted everything that Wauwatosa put down. In the last, like in the article, we highlighted the traffic stops, how the vehicles are supposed to approach each other, how the officer is supposed to, pull up. In multiple reports and conversation with the district attorney's office, they're stating that Mensah followed all TOSA policies, and in that first hearing date, and then in this one, they're highlighting multiple policy violations, which is a problem. Milwaukee City, so Milwaukee Police Department, was supposed to be the sole investigating agency. So the one thing I'm not too keen on this particular witness, it's very specific with Wisconsin law, and this is based off the Michael Bell shooting that happened in Kenosha several years ago, that whatever the agency is that participated in a shooting, so in this case, Wauwatosa's job after the shooting is to completely freeze the crime scene. They're not supposed to be touching stuff. They're not supposed to be conducting witness interview. They're not supposed to be doing any of this stuff according to Wisconsin law. And that's because the department could be very heavily influenced to protect their own. It's going to produce bias. It's going to produce a lot of stuff. Contamination of the crime scene, things like that. So to prevent that from happening is why that law came to be. So Milwaukee came down to be the sole investigating agency on this. Because they just do the police department. It just has to be a separate agency. So, and like we highlighted in the last article that we wrote, and we'll hear more about this later, but we did talk about it in the last article. There were actually 16 officers for Wauwatosa that conducted investigatory responsibility in this Mensah Anderson shooting. They should not have done any of that. The other thing to note, so in this break, if you guys want to kind of go back, we put the shooting video up of Mensah shooting JayAnderson. We've obviously seen some very graphic photos in this stream. The video is obviously a little hard to watch, but in that video, you'll see Wauwatosa police officers removing the gun from the car, and then we highlighted in the article as well the manner in which they walked backwards, as if trying to hide whatever they're doing from the front and with their hands, trying to hide whatever it was that they were doing, and then trying to wave officers basically off camera. We are going to release a second camera view, which we'll release later on, that specifically shows everything to do with this gun and what these officers were actually doing with the gun. And then it's important to note as well, and we talked about this in the article, and then Isaiah and I talked about this on the Raw Topic interview. There's confusion about whether or not in all these reports, initially they mentioned nothing about the gun being loaded, bullets, any of this type of stuff. And then later on down the road, all of a sudden there's bullets and, clips and all this stuff. In this report, Mensah makes note of JayAnderson's gun having an extended clip. Mensah states that he physically saw this. What's in the report later on is that in pictures and things, there was no extended clip. That's made up shit. And what we heard from JayAnderson Jr.'s girlfriend that testified this morning, based on her interview with law enforcement surrounding this entire situation, those detectives had stated to her that the clip of the gun was actually found in the back seat, not the passenger seat or inside of the gun at all. And Wauwatosa and Mensah and, you know, all of Tosa surrounding this, essentially has stated that the clip was inside of the gun, which would then obviously pose more of a threat to Mensah with the clip inside of the gun. And we'll hear this and we'll see in video that this clip was actually not inside of the gun. So those are definitely some details to point out. In the beginning of this video, if you guys want to watch this later, you hear argument on Barry Weber's motion to quash his subpoena. So we had touched on that, where Weber states that he has no knowledge of the investigation. He doesn't have any relevant information. But as we heard in Harmoning's testimony on day one, Weber admits to going down to the medical examiner's office, which is, you know, a huge issue. So the judge did grant the subpoena. So at a later date, we're going to hear Weber testify, and the judge put some rules on that type of stuff. The other thing too, as far as the videos were concerned, so I don't know if you guys kind of picked up on this, and this is where they were talking about these different cars that were in Madison Park at various times that Mensah allegedly had interaction with. So in a statement that Mensah makes, and this is found in one of the reports, Mensah claims to have engaged interaction with different people, claims to have seen different vehicles in this parking lot at various points throughout his patrol. And what's interesting about this, per his statements and then times that he's claiming that certain things have happened, the video that they mentioned from the school, the video doesn't show this stuff. And also what's more importantly too is that in video where there is a vehicle, Mensah's not there. So Mensah would not have seen the vehicles unless he saw the video from the school or was told that by either a Wauwatosa officer or a Milwaukee officer. So he's claiming in his statements in these reports, I saw blah, 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 but he's never in this park to see whatever it was. And that's a huge issue where it's like he's shown all of this other stuff after the fact to help him along in his statements. Another thing, and this was talked about on the Raw Topic interview with me and Isaiah, is that during Mensah's suspension, because Wauwatosa Police Department is investigating this shooting with JayAnderson, which they're not supposed to be anywhere near, Mensah was not put on administrative leave like we see in a bunch of other shooting incidents where, you know, the officers put on paid administrative leave. Mensah was put on a desk job. So in the room that Mensah is working at his desk is in the same exact location that these other detectives who are investigating Mensah's shooting are also working. So Mensah would have been in visual, contact as well as earshot of evidence of the detectives talking, you know, all of these different things. And this is why it's so critical with that Wisconsin law that the shooting agency has no part of this. And then another thing to point out is we hear Motley in this line of questioning talking to Anderson's girlfriend and then this Trainum guy, where, you know, she specifically asked, did anybody from the district attorney's office, you know, come and talk to you? Did anybody from the district attorney's office review this, write any of this up, follow up with this, blah, blah, blah? And the answer is no in in both witnesses' testimonies. So I want to point that out because in a lot of these shooting cases that we're seeing across the country, where you have one side, essentially protester side, saying not justified shooting, and then you have the other side saying, black criminal. These, like what we're seeing here with these bullshit reports and copy and pasting what somebody else is writing without doing the work yourself, without following up. It's these kind of bullshit reports that the district attorney's office is actually getting. And the district attorney's office is not physically going and asking independent questions, seeing a red flag and then saying, hey, here's some red flags. Why is this? They're not doing that. And they're going based off these bullshit reports. And that's what's making their determinations and of why we're seeing so many of the officers getting off on qualified immunity, why we're seeing so many of the officers justified shooting. So it's really a problem, regardless of whatever side you're on, because they're not really doing their due diligence in these critical incidents involving officers. So it's really a problem. It's a serious problem. So they're not seeing, like, they're being specifically handed, which we heard in testimony today. They're being specifically handed certain pieces of evidence and not being handed like the totality of everything. They're not being like with the policy violations that we've already seen. Mensah has violated many of them. The DA is not given the policy manual to conclude, like, was there policy violations, to begin with. There's no investigation on whether or not, from anybody, on whether or not Mensah broke policy. So that's a bit of an issue. So if anybody else has any questions, post them now. They're gonna resume around 1 p.m. So in another like 45 to 50 minutes. So we'll come back with another stream for that. But if you have questions now pertaining to anything, I'll kind of do my best to answer. I obviously I am going to write up an article, a follow-up on this as well. So we'll kind of highlight some of that stuff. Quite a few articles that we've written up on the page. That's why we're not generally live streaming anymore. Lawsuit with KPD. Some privacy stuff when it pertains to the Kenosha County Courthouse. All types of stuff. So give this like another minute. If there's no other questions, I'm going to jump off. If you guys are able to and want to help us out, feel free to donate. That obviously helps me continue to sit here and do this stuff. Pays for a lot, pays for records that we're trying to release to you guys. Obviously my time. roof over my head, all that. All right. If you guys have any other questions, save them for the second round of this, and I'll see you guys in about 45 minutes.